People with purpose. Personal friends and strangers you meet on the street. Many among you are people with purpose. Today, you will meet people who have experienced a change of heart and mind and whose lives now have meaning. This series of telecasts, led by Dr. Harold Lane, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Menlo Park, California, will seek to probe the meaning and reality which can be directional for everyone. Dr. Lane.
Not all of us come from the same backgrounds and experiences. Many of us have seen life from a different perspective from those to whom we'll be speaking today. I'm going to be talking with some men who have seen life from the seamier side. Note very carefully the expressions on their face. Listen to what they're saying. If you will, very carefully, notice the musicians who sing and play, because they've become people with purpose. They seek to convey to you the possibility of inward peace. There is a reason behind this peace, and we'll be talking about it. Not all of the telecasts will have to do with people from backgrounds likened unto these that you will be hearing today. On other times, we will be talking to men who are the heads of business. We will be talking to housewives, young people. We'll be giving opportunities from people from various walks of life to express what makes them people of purpose. It's a real pleasure today to have with us a group from our church, the First Baptist Church of Menlo Park. They're known to us as Daybreak.
Picked a flower today. Well, I thought I'd give it away. I whispered to that flower of mine, I must allow your light to shine. So everyone, could wonder at you. Flower starts to grow, just like my eye. Petals bending out, coming to Jesus gave me the flower of his love, the cup of sweetness from above. And now I give this flower to you, so you can find peace and joy too. So everyone, living everywhere, would be happy too. Flowers start to grow, just like my life. Petals fading out, the true I picked a flower today. I thought I'd give it away to you.
I have with me today two men who have experienced a change in their lives, what might be known as an about face. Both of these men in former days have experienced a sentence imposed by the courts. As a result of a ministry conducted by First Baptist Church in Menlo Park, known as Operation Help, these men have been reached for Jesus Christ and, I believe, have become people of purpose. I'd like to introduce to you John Hopkins, who is presently a salesman, studying to be a realtor, and Rick Morgan, who is a printer. First, John, I would like to ask if you would share with us a little bit of your background and experience. Would you do that?
Your pleasure. Pastor, well, of course, you know more or less where I've been and so forth, but to me, what Christ has done for my life is something like, I always think of Paul in the Bible and that sort of thing, because it was so much of an about face that it astounds me to think of where I was before. You know, it's like a bad nightmare to realize how bad off I was before I found Christ. 3 years ago, I was in jail in San Mateo County, the Sheriff's Honor Camp, which is a facility where they normally keep guys that are state cases. However, my case was federal. I had been arrested for mail fraud in the Hawaiian Islands and had been sentenced there for that, came back and was arrested again, and now I was out at the Sheriff's Honor Camp, and some Christian brothers and sisters from the First Baptist Church in Menlo Park came down to talk to some of the prisoners. Every Wednesday night they would be there, and they would talk to us about inviting Christ into our lives. And so I went down to make fun of this program, you know. And this one brother, Don Garrett, asked me one day, well, actually he challenged me. He said, you know, John, it takes a lot of faith, you know, to really believe. And if you have just enough faith, just the faith of a mustard seed, you open your heart about that much, and you invite Jesus Christ to come into your heart, then he'll come into your heart and he'll change you and he'll make you the kind of person you've always wanted to be. But it's not enough just to invite him in. You have to then follow him.
Mm-hmm.
And so since then, I've been doing this, and I teach Sunday school now at church, and I have been a youth counselor during the summer for a summer program and a lot of different things. And I still have difficulties in my life, but I have about 500 people that really love and care about me. And the love comes through Christ, you know, because the Holy Spirit is really a person that dwells in me and reaches out to love other people, because this is what God is all about. It's a personal relationship between man and God, and that's what changed me.
John, that's very interesting, because the thing that we're trying to see here is the change that's happened, what took place before and what's happening now. Some of the things from before are, I'm sure, things that you're not proud of. Would you be willing to share just a little bit for what you were arrested? And
Sure.
This would make a comparison, I think, for us.
Well, first of all, I started out leading a fairly normal life. I was brought up an Episcopalian. I went to church when I was a kid. I was an acolyte and a crucifer, but I never really believed in these things, and I drifted away when I was about 18, became more or less an atheist, started in with the drinking and the marijuana and the pills and these things, and then led a pretty fast life. And I was married once in 1965, annulled in 66, married again in 66, annulled in 68, had a business go bankrupt the year before, and my life had lost all meaning, all purpose. And so I went to the Hawaiian Islands to try to regain some kind of reason to live and everything. And while I was there, because drugs are so prevalent, I became heavily involved. From just being a guy that smoked a little marijuana or turned on once in a while to one thing or another, I became a middleman in heroin, where I would deliver to pushers and dealers. And this is something that involves then the syndicate. I had several times that I was almost killed for this. One time I was in the jungle over there in Honolulu, which is a really rough area, and I had to go up a back alleyway, you know, to score from someone. And while I was up there, a couple of guys from the Hawaiian local syndicate, which is local Hawaiians, tried to push me down a staircase and do me in, you know, and I was kind of battered up and everything, and I crawled back to my hotel room, and I remember wishing that if only at that moment, you know, I could be someplace else or be someone else. And I remember another time being on LSD, and I went down to the beach, and my mind just felt like it was exploding, and I got down on my knees and I started praying that if Christ was real, that he'd show himself to me, because all these Christians had been talking to me about Christ. And it was Good Friday, 1969, and I saw Christ walking on the water, coming towards me. And I still wonder, you know, to this day, it could have been from the LSD or something, but it happened anyway. And to me, it seemed like a reality. And I still remember it because of it being so vivid. And I remember grabbing these people on the beach and saying, hey, listen, you know, Jesus Christ has really died for your sins. And they're going, man, you're crazy. Your eyes are dilated. You know, and maybe that isn't even pertinent to a testimony or anything like that. But it was a reality to me. And Jesus Christ is a reality to me. And Jesus Christ lives in me. And he's the most important thing in the world to me. And without Christ in my life right now, I would be dead, because I was physically and spiritually dead before. And the only reason I'm even able to stand up and talk right now is because Jesus Christ did completely and totally change my life. I have a decent job. I have people that care about me now. And man, I just don't know what else I could say, except that if you don't know Christ right now, and why not just, you know, take me up on the challenge that Don gave me, you know. Invite Christ into your life. If he's not real, the worst thing that can happen is you're going to say a prayer in vain. But if he is real, you're going to receive a free gift from heaven, which is eternal life. Your whole life is going to change. You're going to see things happen in your life that you couldn't even imagine would be possible, beautiful things.
Okay. John, you've expressed to us a change that has been so strategic. And I think that every one of us would be remiss if we missed the comparison and the contrast. Rick, I think you have something to share with us. What about your background and your experience?
Well, John and I come from varied backgrounds, yet we have a lot in common. I don't like to use the word depravity, but I guess you could. I find that in my life I'd done that which I thought was important, which I thought was good, which I found everything was self-centered around me, and I tried to do anything that would better me, and I didn't care who I hurt or how I done it. Looking back over the years, I've hurt a lot of people. My parents, I rejected school, I rejected my parents. I didn't have a whole lot for a family, but what I had, I certainly abused. When I got on my own, it carried right on into the streets. I abused my friends, my enemies, anybody. I used people, started running with less than the best people, got into bike group. This entails a lot of misery, a lot of problems. I got into drinking a little bit, taking pills, smoking a little dope, and I thought this was really neat. But I had to keep doing it, keep renewing every day, because you'd get up in the morning and there's nothing. So you'd go out and grab the jug or whatever you're going to do and try to do something and make the day go. And it kept progressing from bad to worse, to the point that I couldn't hold a job because I couldn't make it to work. Then I started writing checks, knowing that I could cover them on next week's check, which that didn't work, so then I had to leave one state, so I'd go to another. Finally, that started building up, where I had different warrants. The FBI was looking for me. Then I started becoming violent. I didn't like anybody talking to me. I didn't want anybody around. Finally, I was extradited a couple of times, and fortunately I beat both times. And that didn't change me. I had a short look at jail a few times, and I thought, well, I just made a mistake. Not the mistake, it wasn't writing the checks, it was getting caught. So I continued the pattern and continued abusing people, and finally it caught up. I was sentenced to 9 months, which was originally a felony. I got it dropped for violence and forgery by check, and I was sent to honor camp. And at honor camp I had the opportunity, and it was a forced opportunity, to sit and evaluate my life a little bit. It's up in the mountains. You can leave if you want, but it'd take you about 2 days to leave. You can't walk out. So I had to face myself, and there just wasn't anything worth living for.
And it was there, Rick, that change happened for you?
Oh, yes, yes. There's an honor camp ministry from the First Baptist Church in Menlo Park, and they come up once a week, and they share their lives, their time, and their love with people incarcerated. And I wasn't particularly interested in hearing about Jesus Christ, but I did want someone to talk to. So I'd go down there, and they would talk to me. They were friendly. They weren't afraid of me. They didn't think that I was some kind of freak. They acted like I might have a problem, and I started evaluating, and I started looking at myself, and the more I looked, the more repulsed I got. I just couldn't face it anymore, so I went down, and I seriously sat down and I listened to Don Garrett, you were speaking of, and Peter Hansen, and they told me about Jesus Christ and how he could change my life. And I didn't really believe it, but I was willing to try anything because I couldn't go on living like this. There had to be a change, and if Christ could do it, I'll take it. So I went up behind the barracks. I didn't want anybody to know that I was going to pray. I've got to maintain a strong image there. Got to keep that violent front up. I went out behind the barracks, and I walked a little bit, and I talked a little bit to God, and he humbled me. He knocked me clear down. I got a good look at myself, and I couldn't stand it. And I asked him to come into my life, to change it, to do something with it, He didn't get me out of jail, but he gave me a reason for being there and a reason to stay.
Are you satisfied with your life now, Rick?
Well, I'm satisfied with the motivation in it. My life's got a long ways to go. I've got a lot of clearing up to do. I have a lot of past to straighten up. Wrongs I can't ever correct, but I can help other people like they've helped me. But the one thing that I am satisfied with is Jesus Christ in my life.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you men. I believe that you have shared with us some of the things we needed to hear of what Christ can do, giving purpose to life.
The sky was on fire, put your faith in Jesus, my friend. Trust him if you would. He said, step out. Just that step out.
We've been talking today to some men who have been in prison and who have found purpose in their life. Jesus said in Matthew the 25th chapter, "I was in prison and you visited me." Perhaps some of us think the only way to serve God is through the institutional church. I believe in the institutional church. I serve God in it and through it. But there are times I recognize we have to move beyond the walls of the institution. Some of the men who have been reached, not only those you have seen this evening, but others have been reached by the very fact that someone cared enough to go to them and share the good news. These are people who probably never would have darkened the doors of a house of worship. Many of you who are watching are people who have not been in prison. You've never been incarcerated. You haven't been behind bars. You don't have the idea of being imprisoned at all, at least from that particular point of view. It may very well be, however, that some of you who are watching are people who have been incarcerated by your own emotions, people who have felt conscience-stricken, guilty, and have never been freed from something that seems to keep you enslaved and in bondage. I have a friend who is trying very hard to have a victory over a drinking problem. He says to me, "You know, if only, Harold, I could have release from this, I think life would take on new dimension." And I've tried to point to him for the means in which he could find the release he's looking for. I know many of you are trying to find victory over various habits in your life. They aren't bars physically, but they are limitations and barricades to having really purposeful lives. I know of a friend that many years ago in seminary came to my attention in Chicago, Illinois, over on 3040 West Washington, a man by the name of Al Crocker, who came from Maine, the winter wonderland. And as a teenager, Al told me he was sledding. And in his experience coming down the hill, he fell off the sled, and that runner ran right through his forehead. Al told me that his eyesight was gone. He no longer had vision. He began to wonder, what could he do with his life? Where would there be purpose? He was disfigured physically. Emotionally, he felt tremendous strain. He felt excommunicated. Al said that in his time of relating to God and prayer, he said he found that God had for him real purpose. I remember seeing Al walking around the halls of the seminary, there behind his lead dog, Duke. Al said to me, "I believe that God will give me release from my prison when I show to him I'm willing to do the very best I can." Today, Al has victory in his life. He went into evangelism. He began to share the news that there is freedom for one who has faith and will trust. He was in prison to himself, and God gave him release. God said to him, "Al, you can find purpose for your life." He's now a parish minister in the state of Maine. How wonderful to see what God can do for those who are willing to allow him to do so. Yet some of us seemingly are being strangled by our own emotion. How do you find release? Where is that purpose for which we look? Some of you are saying, what would really make the difference if I weren't here? Who would sincerely miss me if I weren't alive? You're wondering, where do I plug into life? And how do I find purpose in being? Jesus said, "I was in prison and you visited me," and those who asked the question, "Lord, when did we visit you?" He said, "Inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." Finding release from the shackles of conscience and guilt and emotion is equally as exciting as being freed from the bars that incarcerate men in penitentiaries. Would you like to be a person with purpose? I'd like to suggest to you that there is a way, and I have a little booklet that I'd like to have you write for. It's entitled People with Purpose.